Welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our theme for 2026 continues. The future of work, meaning is the new money. Because meaning is simply the greatest motivational force on earth. But 68% of the global workforce is disengaged, leaving $9.6 trillion in productivity on the table every year. Gen Z, the canary in the coal mine, is exposing structural failures everyone else learned to ignore, rationalize, or endure. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host, bringing over 30 years of experience in leadership, strategic thinking, and designing solutions that solve real problems. This podcast delivers boots-on-the-ground intelligence, real conversations with CEOs, fractional executives, coaches, and small and medium-sized business leaders navigating the same crisis, mitigating the talent hemorrhage before competitive viability disappears. We go beyond symptoms like engagement scores and wellness programs to focus on the structural failures beneath them. Frontline intelligence, actionable frameworks, hard truths. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now let's throttle up and dive into today's episode. Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. This is your host, Dr. John Dentico. With me this morning is Michael Gips. Michael Gips has spent over 30 years in the business of making sure that when things go sideways, and in security and risk, things always go sideways, there is someone in the room who actually knows what to do. He is managing director at Kroll, one of the world's leading global risk advisory firms, a certified protection professional, a chartered security professional, and the author of a book with one of the most honest titles I've seen in a long time. It's not in the manual, Real-World Leadership for Security and Risk Professionals. Because let's be honest, when the crisis hits, nobody's reading the manual. He writes a monthly leadership column for Security Magazine. He has advised security functions across corporate, nonprofit, cultural, and public-facing institutions, often in the middle of crisis, transition, and organizational stress, which, as we know, is exactly when leadership either shows up or falls apart. He brings grounded insights, candid stories, and according to everything I've read, a genuinely wry sense of humor, which tells me he survived enough chaos to find it funny in retrospect. And I'm truly pleased and delighted to have Michael here with me this morning on this podcast. Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I'm great, John. Thank you for that warm and generous introduction. Happy to chat with you. Looking forward to some back and forth on leadership principles and ideas and see what we can come up with together.
That'd be great. I'm looking forward to it. So, Michael, I always like to start off with this question. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up, and what were some of the fundamental influences in your early life?
I grew up outside of New York City in Westchester County in a place called New Rochelle, and people of my age will remember the Dick Van Dyke Show. That's where that took place. Younger generations may not have any idea what I'm talking about, but it was sort of a bedroom community. And believe it or not, the biggest influences on my life were my parents. My father was in advertising, specifically in movie poster design. That's what he was known for. And my mother wrote movie poster lines. So right behind me, you can see there's the Alien poster. And my father designed that. And the line for that is, the tagline is, "In space, no one can hear you scream." My mother wrote that. So together they created some of the most iconic movie posters in history. So I grew up very much in I don't know if it's art-based background, but sort of creative background. So design, iconography, film. One of my brothers is a producer in Hollywood. He is a partner and he does reality and documentary. And another brother works for him. Another brother works in radio. So so we've had that kind of background. Not the usual security leadership biography, but it did help me get to where I am today.
Well, it sounds to me like they were think and act outside the box kind of folks. So it wasn't a normal, straight go to work every day, work in an organization, be a manager or a salesperson or whatever. It really, and having a creative background is, I think, one of the more important things you can have in this life is to have at least an appreciation for what that is and how it kind of comes to be. So I get it. Appreciate it very much. Michael, let me ask you this question. You've titled your book, It's Not in the Manual. And I think that's one of the most honest things anyone in leadership has said out loud. DDI's Global Leadership Forecast, that's Development Dimensions International, tells us that only 30% of leaders feel that they have sufficient time to execute their responsibilities with the depth they require. And of course, we're talking across different types of organizations. So they were already underwater before the crisis hits, in many respects. In security and risk, the crisis doesn't wait. What actually happens to a leader in that moment when the manual runs out and the clock is running?
Well, you don't fall back on plans. You fall back on principle, and you leverage the relationships you've created with the people, both with who you lead and people you work with. So that's when mission drives everything you do, like after a crisis occurs. You go back to basic principles. What is our mission? What are our values? It's protect life. It's to help people, protect the brand or whatever. And you have to get back to core principles, and that gives you clarity of what to do. Everything else, the frivolous stuff, goes away, right? It's like, oh, we don't really need to go buy the book here. No one knows where the book is anyway and which page to turn to, right? Because a crisis never falls neatly into one category. Turn here for a bomb threat. Turn here for a tornado. Turn here for a snowstorm or a gas leak. And it's like these things always converge. There's way more elements than you would have considered, cascading effects or nuances that kind of throw everything out of whack. So you have to be able to lead, think on your feet, and be adaptable, flexible, and be able to operate with limited information while still keeping yourself open to taking in new information as circumstances on the ground develop rapidly.
Well, it sounds like people are going to think you're my shill here because I have spoken ad nauseum.
I've been called worse things.
I have spoken ad nauseum about the importance of a clearly defined mission and mission statement. Now, I will tell you very honestly, that comes out of my military background. I mean, I learned the importance of mission. Mission is everything. And I don't think that many organizations understand that. I can't tell you how many times I've had people from all over the world on my podcast. And when we begin to talk a little bit about mission statements, there's always this wry laugh. We have this paragraph that's tattooed to the wall in the lobby, which really doesn't drive what the real sense of mission is or has to be. For me, it's a one sentence, and everybody should be able to recite it from memory so that there is, as you say, specific, powerful clarity. Because you're absolutely right. When the chips are down and you're in crisis, I don't think there is another situation that can occur which demonstrates the power of a clear mission than something, as you said, where you're in crisis. Now what do we do? And what guides us? What is it? Is it safety of life? Is safety of life the premier thing that we do? Okay, well, that drives every decision from here on out. I absolutely agree with that. I'd love to throw it back to you and get any more reflection on that.
I've actually come into scenarios where they've had crises, and I can't name the environments or the employers or the facilities because you would immediately know and understand why. But I've been put into these situations and people just don't know where to look. And a lot of these places just didn't have formal security because they weren't big institutions. It fell under facilities or fell under HR or some other function. And no one knows really where to look. And they want someone to comfort them, give them advice, make sure that, tell them that it's okay, what they're doing is meaningful and that they're protected. Obviously, you're telling them that, you're telling them the truth. You don't want to come in there and whitewash them or anything. But that's part of what you do coming in as a head of security or someone to deal with crises. Quickly come in, calm people down, assess the situation, figure what's needed in the short term, make people feel comfortable. And generally after a catastrophe or a crisis, it's, in the immediate aftermath, there might be a second attack and it'll create a lot of attention, but usually nothing is going to happen after that. There's too much attention on that area. After the copycats or the looky-loos and the fake threat people are gone, you can assess what's needed in the longer term. But people just they're looking for somebody to lead them, make them feel better, who's been there before, knows what to do. Probably more important than that, exhibits a calm demeanor and thoughtfulness. And I don't come in saying, I have all the answers immediately. I come in and say, look, I've been here before. I know what to do, but I need to work you're the experts here. You know the facility. You know the processes. You know the people who come in and out of here every day. I am learning from you. It's a give and take. Let's help each other. So it's crucial to bring in the staff or the patrons or whoever, whoever the stakeholders are, whoever's ownership, and work with them, make sure that you're not a transient person just barking out orders and say, okay, now you need to put in these plans. You need to change the locks on the doors. You need a new alarm system. You need guards. That stuff is all well and good, but it's not the core of what they need. It's like you're partnering with them and using them as working with them as experts and serving your role. And it's a synergistic relationship between the two. So I can't stress that enough.
I absolutely agree. I think one of the things that gets lost, I don't think many people know this, but I'll just mention it. One of the greatest advantages and attributes that Americans had in World War II, and I still believe exists in people today, but one of the greatest attributes the Americans had, and I'll use a football metaphor if I can, is that we were the greatest broken field runners in the game. When a plan went into the toilet, so to speak, we could take what was left, stay on mission. What is the mission? What are we really trying to do? And that's why mission is so vital. The clarity of mission is so vital. And then from there, figure out what needs to be done. Okay, you do this, we'll go here. Remember, this is our mission. This is what we absolutely have to be able to do. And I think that still resides in many people today in the United States. I believe we don't necessarily, a plan is great. I love plans. It's a starting point. Okay, but when things go south quickly, you have to be able to say, well, we're not done here. We're not done. We pick up and let's run with it and see where this takes us and modify and create as we go. And the point you made earlier, and I want to really point to this because this is a really important point for the way I look at leadership. And that is, I don't see leadership today. I don't know if it ever has been. I think it's much more an influence relationship. And as you pointed to, the relationships that you had and the training that I have done for years has always been about build the relationships now before you need them, before you have to go to them, because it's too late then. You're trying to build trust because trust is the load leveler. Trust is the universal. Whether you're talking about an AI system or you're talking about just people knowing and trusting one another. So building relationships today, going outside of your comfort zone. Who do I know? Who do I need to know? I don't know that person. Maybe I'll give them a call. We'll go have a cup of coffee. I always say a cup of coffee is the single greatest leadership development tool on the planet. You can call someone up, let's have a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and let's go sit down and see if we can work out how we might work together if X, Y, and Z were to happen. I'd love to get your reflection on that.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly. Now I see why people might say I'm a shill or we're doppelgangers or something like that. I say in my book that security is often called the Department of No. Like, no, you can't go there. You can't open that door. You can't have access there. You can't go on that business trip because it's too dangerous, whatever. But I think that, and we're advisors of security, right? As security leaders, we don't generally tell people yes or no. We say yes if, or yes but, no unless, because we advise on risk. Generally, we're not making the decision on risk. That goes to whoever owns the asset or the process. Might be the CEO, might be the CFO, might be whoever it is, Chief Human Resource Officer. I like to say that we should be the Department of KNOW, know everybody, have relationships, know how everything works. I should know your processes. If you're Chief Human Resource Officer, you're Chief Legal Officer, I should know your processes to the extent I can, as well as you do, how the business makes money, how marketing sends its message out, because there can be cracks anywhere. And there's a difference between knowing and then being smug about it and trying to tell people what to do about it. You don't do that, right? You work as a partner. So if you know somebody's business well and are confident about it, but also low key and respectful, you can work as a partner. They will have immense respect for you for knowing what you do, having educated yourself, not only knowing them, but knowing what they have to deal with. You will find yourself having a very strong partner, someone who will turn to you for advice. I've found in the past with myself and with others, these are people now who will go to bat for you. If you want to get something done for security, they'll leverage their weight and say, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. You'll have an ear that goes up, even if you don't report to the CEO. This kind of influence, this kind of knowledge, these relationships percolate all the way to the top. That will burnish your reputation and really give you, if not an actual seat at the table, basically a virtual seat at the table, right? Or have other people, perhaps even better, having advocates for you who are at that table.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. I'll bet you have tons of stories because I've heard them from law enforcement officers. You know, one department is in a crisis, in a fix, and because they know people in other departments or in a sheriff's office, they pick up, how many times have they picked up the phone and said, do you have an air asset? Maybe a small department doesn't have an air asset, doesn't have a helo, and they'll call up a neighboring department that's bigger, for example, has an air asset, and in 3 or 4 minutes or 10 minutes, an air asset is now showing up to support another law enforcement organization. I've always talked about things as you got to get out of this mindset. When I've trained law enforcement, it can be regional. It can be a regional response to things. And you see a lot more of that happening, I think. After 9/11, I think people really started to understand, wait a minute, we can't do this alone. We really do need to reach out to our regional partners and work together. I'd love to get any reflection you have on those comments.
Yeah, I think that before 9/11, the idea, and I know it's going back a long time now, I've been in this industry for 30 years, that even though there were all sorts of groups that tried to bring public and private partners together, joint terrorism task forces, and this group and that group, and like Homeland Security, intelligence group, I forget, InfraGard, and they're still around today, and a lot of them are good. But there's always, even among law enforcement agencies themselves, a little bit of mistrust. Like, I don't know these people. Like, I know we do well. Like, what do they have? And then you get to the private sector and the public sector, they have distrust because private sectors, law enforcement is going to share anything with us. They're just take only. And the law enforcement might say, the private sector, they don't want to be regulated, right? They're not going to, or they don't want any competitive information to get out. They're not going to share incidents with us unless it benefits them. Since 9/11 and since sort of the whole pace of security, like private security has accelerated, the nature of threats, a lot more complicated with the whole development of cyber, physical, cyber, social media threats. They all now mesh together. In my book, I talk about what I call and what other people call as well Perma-Crisis or polycrisis. There's always a crisis going on. There's always something, and usually several things. It's quaint back in the day when only one big thing happened. There was a hurricane, whatever, that flooded my building. Those were the days. I have a hurricane now. Half my staff is stuck in Iran or whatever, or wherever Iran is bombing. I have people in Israel. I have people in Venezuela. One of my facilities is subject to a ransomware attack. Everything is going on at once, right? So it's much more complicated. There's need for more interaction among private sector entities themselves, public sector, and information sharing, collaboration now more than ever. And there's still, I don't want to say, oh, it's perfect now, but it's getting a lot better. We have massive amounts of data. What do we do with the data that we're picking up from video surveillance, from audio feeds, from alarm feeds, from other kinds of analytics, from weapons detection, from occupancy sensors, stuff like that? All these things on buildings, smart buildings. What do we do with them? And there's privacy concerns about some things, but we have the data to share. How do we do that responsibly? I'll give you an example. I'm head of security for a house of worship that has a big school, both during the day and on weekends for religious studies. And there are people who work there and some people who come in who we don't know about, whether they are, what their citizenship status is, right? And they're worried about ICE coming in. And so, okay, now you have legitimate concerns of the federal government, of people who are not citizens and perhaps overstayed a visa or just never got a visa. And then you have privacy, and you have people who have formed attachments. There's people here who may be law-abiding citizens. So there's a lot of things going on. And you have a whole bunch of different factors weighing in on, okay, so we do have, in this facility, we have plate readers, right? We have video surveillance. We have the opportunity to get new devices that will feed right into local police. So there's a big debate right now. Do we want that? We'll get free cameras, we'll get free license plate readers, if these other things, but that exposes the interior of our facility, it's not all covered, to oversight or overwatch by police. And some people aren't comfortable with that. It's a fairly liberal institution, but there's also a very conservative base. So factors like everything is complicated now. So just something simple where, okay, we're going to protect the facility. Oh no, that implicates people who might be afraid for their statuses living in this country and being sent back to perhaps a country where it's not safe or they had to flee. So I know there's a long-winded way of talking about just one place and one issue, but that I think aptly describes how even like a simple single facility, single issue gets entangled in this whole geopolitical chaos, like all these different factors, technology, geopolitics, local politics, all come into play for just one issue and one facility.
Yeah, it's to say the least, it's a quagmire. I mean, it's so many different interests. I'd like to think all of them operating for a better environment. Let me just put it that way. I would like to think that we're all coming in with a higher moral compass to what they're bringing. I do believe that if they sat down and worked certain things out, there may be a way to at least work through some of it. Because as you've so aptly pointed out, it is incredibly complex. One of the things that occurred to me while you were talking is at a level, and I'm not saying what you've described is a very complex level. If there's a score from 1 to 10, we're talking 10 or 11 here in terms of what you're saying. But I would like to think one of the things I've learned in my work is one of the ways that you can tear down barriers is to train people together. Bring people from different walks of life together in a training environment that focuses, and before this we talked about the simulation work, that focuses not on individuals and on egos, but focuses on a problem. I've always been surprised by what happens when people stop bringing an ego to the problem and start worrying about a common issue or a common problem, something they can gather around. And there may be, chances are there's going to be a lot of emotional letting of their emotions during this period. But I would say, let them get it off their chest. Let them blow it off. And then once that's done, once it's on the table, now we can kind of work through, okay, fine. You've had your say. Now what do we do? Where do we go from here? So it's like you say, with all the technology and all the feeds and all the things that are going on, it almost seems irreparable. It almost seems like it can't be fixed. But I have great faith in people. I have great faith in people that if we can find that common ground, safety, security, if that's the common ground, again, I reflect back to the mission. If the mission for our community is X, and we pretty much agree that's what it is, that helps guide us through where we need to go. Each group says, yeah, we care about that. Our children are important to us. Safety and security for us and our children is important to us. Good. Okay. Now we have a common ground. We can work from there. And I think that puts a lot of the other stuff aside. But no doubt, as you well point out, it is a difficult, complex problem. Anyway, let's move on.
It's funny. Before you
go ahead.
Every time you get on a thread, I'm thinking you're sharing wisdom. I think I have like 50 thoughts going through. I could pursue that line. So this area is so rich for dialogue that there are areas we don't touch on, but that's what's great about this conversation. It can go in a lot of different ways. So please, if I was just thinking, we could move this way, that way, but I'm here at your direction, and please, it's whatever you want to talk about next is great.
Oh, I appreciate that very much. Yeah, I like to keep it free flowing, but I've seen it. I have been involved with law enforcement training for a lot of years, and I've talked to communities and did community training. I've seen the issues that people bring to the table up front, and I've seen them, in a lot of ways, thinking they couldn't find their way through it. But once they recognized that they had a common goal, a mission for a large group of people, and they began to work with one another, build relationships. To me, 21st century leadership is all about building relationships. And you build the relationships, and slowly but surely, people start to understand, hey, you know what? I may need to alter my idea of this. And I've seen police change their mind. I've seen police say, no, we can't do that. We have to come at it from a totally different perspective. And once you start seeing people work together, it's miraculous what can happen, that they're really become vested in each other's outcomes. And I think that's so very important. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like the fact that you just left it as get vested in their outcomes, because I think the corollary to what you said in developing relationships and being the key to leadership is that you're not a true leader. In fact, I think you will have failed as a leader if you do not develop other leaders, young leaders, new talent to go forth, under you and or to succeed you in that organization and do things differently than you, bring in different directions and expand the horizons. And you have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to develop our people. I'd like to, for example, I have a few people who work for me right now who they have limited experience. I do things that they haven't been able to do. So different kinds of assessments or understanding of different kinds of policies or governance frameworks and security. They may be really good at kid protection or assessment of residential facilities or offices. But if I don't help them understand what I know about how to set up a security structure and organization under perhaps a different department. Okay, this is how it would go under HR. This is how it would go under operations. This is under legal. What appropriate policies and procedures are. What kind of staffing structure and models, reporting lines, personnel, technology. That I haven't done my duty, right? It's helping them develop their skills, but also developing their confidence and their range. And not forcing anybody to do anything, but always moving them out to get a little less comfortable with what they're doing. And it's not, leadership and doing certain things isn't for everyone. So, but I give everyone the opportunity, right? If they want to decline, some people are great. They like what they're doing. They're a manager or something. They manage a project. That's all they want to do. They're great at it. They want to go home at 5:00. More power to them. It's in certain contexts. In security, you kind of never leave at 5:00. But I have folks who are trying to go into thought leadership. I happen to write a lot, do webinars, present at conferences. Part of my responsibility, I think, is to help them find their voice, help them find topics, introduce them to the world, these different groups or magazines or publications, because if they keep hearing my voice, I can write articles or give presentations. I'm just one person with a narrow set of experiences and perspectives. We need more educated voices, different perspectives. And I find people say, I can't write an article for a magazine. I'm not a writer. Just co-author one with me. I'll write it. You put in whatever you want. We'll massage it together and they'll find, that wasn't that hard. It's like, okay, next time you take the lead, or we'll co-present at a conference. Oh, I can't do that. I get scared on stage. All right, then you just do 5 minutes, or I'll just do a conversation with you. Tell me what you want to say. I'll feed that to you. As long as it's something that's helpful to our audience, I will give you the platform. You say what you want. I'll take on the rest. And as you get more comfortable, you can pipe in. Those are the sorts of things to encourage people, to grow into their leadership as full leaders. And I realize I'm talking necessarily about job duties, but extracurricular things. But these are things that help round out a person and make them better leaders in the workforce and at home and in their communities.
Yeah, I'll tell you, my definition of leadership is probably a bit more radical than what other people would use. For the longest time, leadership has been the domain, if you will, of one individual. A leader gives us leadership. What I've learned about leadership and the way I see leadership is a process to me. The process of leadership. Can we teach people the processes of leadership? I'll give you one example I use all the time. The difference between strategic thinking and strategic planning. For me, strategic thinking is leadership. Strategic planning is management. And the difference is that in strategic planning, you're looking to find answers to questions. In strategic thinking, you've got to make sure you're asking yourself the right questions, or you're going to throw good money after bad. What people do often is they'll set a vision or a mission for the organization and they go right to planning. And the answer is no. Take a step back. What do you really want to solve? What's in the way of you achieving your mission? Let's put those things on what we do well and what we don't do so well, and let's find the gaps, and now we can feed those gaps into the strategic planning process. So to me, anybody who chooses to accept the responsibility and the risk can do leadership if we teach leadership as a process. One of the metaphors I'm using lately is kind of a way to get people to see it is, we spent years, 70 years of leadership development trying to create leaders that are like Jedi Knights. We have a problem, they come down and vanquish the problem right before our very eyes. And I say, well, maybe that's not the way we need to think about leadership in a society where information and knowledge has become so democratized, where a 27 or 28-year-old hard charger has access to AI, several AI tools, and now can gin up strategies, can look at the future of their organization, look at the future of things like, let's be a bit more specific, cyber, AI, cyber, that kind of a thing. I mean, that gives them the power of knowledge and information to bring to bear. And so anybody who chooses can step up and be a leader if we can teach them the different processes of leadership. I'd love to get your reflection on that.
Yeah, I would say that through the course of writing this book, I came to that conclusion. And a lot of it was because I studied the history of leadership. And this is not an academic book. There are some academic aspects, but it's a lot of stories. It's a lot of kind of real life examples and sort of straight writing. But for part of it, okay, I can understand what I'm facing here in security leadership, because no one's really addressed the security leadership nexus. There are a million security books, there are a million leadership books, many on security leadership. So I looked at the old theories like great man theory. That's like, you have to be Abraham Lincoln or Julius Caesar. Great man can be great woman too. You can even be Queen Elizabeth or whoever. That kind of went away with the dominance of the monarchies. But that was big like in the 1840s, right? Then it was trait theory. It's like, okay, if you have these traits, decisiveness and integrity, but if you didn't have those traits, you're out of luck, right? So, and then it moved on to things like there are a million others, right? It's like, okay, it's behavior. Okay, it's servant leadership. It's transformational leadership. It's transitional leadership. It's values-based leadership. And I go through all these things and there's all overlap. But I think where I come down is like everything is adaptive leadership, because leadership is different. It's different things for different people. And it should be a different thing for you and me at different times, depending on the situation. Like sometimes the best thing I can do is defer to somebody else, a younger person on my team, let them take the reins. Someone who doesn't think they're a leader, but they are, and they'll figure it out because they know this topic well. They've been through this before. They get along well with their people. They have good rapport. They have good command of the subject. All of a sudden, you see a birth of a leader who didn't realize bud sprouting. Other times, it's okay. You're coming to a crisis situation. You need calm. You need to sort of model what a leader does, step in with authority, but also with empathy. Other times, I think it's, as I talked about polycrisis, every crisis is different. Every situation is different. And you have to know your people. And I've had plenty of failures as a leader as well. I mean, I've tried to lead people in the same way, people who are very different and didn't respond to the same kind of what I was offering, which was motivational. It doesn't work with everybody. I had a person who I was trying to encourage he was trying to get a project off the ground and he needed support from the department. So it was like an investment in security, say, and other people were skeptical. And I wanted him to fight for it. And he brought it up in the meeting and everyone shot it down. And he looked at me and I didn't say anything. I kind of raised the issue again, teed it up for him again. he didn't say anything, and he got dejected and kind of put his head down. And then later on, I said, what did you fight for? He goes, what'd I do? Rank and file guy. I look to the leader. I give it to the leader doesn't take it and run, then it's dead. I'm just reporting for duty, sir. It's like, okay. And I knew that, but I didn't know it to that extreme. So what am I going to do with him? That's not the way I lead, but I really like this. So we had to figure out a way where I could get him to fight for this, get him out of his comfort zone, have me change the way I lead a little bit, because it's not in the manual. It's a cookie cutter, right? Everybody responds differently to different things. So I really like, not that I fall into one typology or one framework of a leader or type, but I think adaptive gets at a lot of the models that I discuss in the book.
Yeah, to me, the practice of leadership is similar across different things because we're teaching the processes. Here's the 5 or 6 processes and different things. One of the things I didn't mention in the metaphor when I was talking about Jedi Knights is that I look at leaders today because of the democratization of knowledge and as being much more like Yoda. Their job is to, look, just like you said, their job is to say, is not to solve the problem. Their job is to create an environment where the junior Jedi gets a chance to step up and solve the problem and learn, in a sense, this is what I have to fight for. I talk about that several times, that you got to fight for your ideas and you got to fight for your people. And when you learn to do that, when you're willing to step forward and do that, that's when you're really stepping into the shoes of a leader. I'm going to fight for my people, because for every one person that tells you you're doing a great job, 12 are going to tell you you're out of your mind. Mm-hmm. So as long as you understand those figures, that's okay. Accept the odds and move forward. So I absolutely agree with you. We're in the midst of a leadership revolution. It's changing dynamically because the leader at the top of the heap, who has always been the calculation, if you will, of certainty, they have all the answers. All we have to do is follow them. In a world that's changing so rapidly and that is so complex, leaders have to embrace doubt and ambiguity. And here's the magical thing that happens when you do that. When you embrace doubt and ambiguity, you kick the door open for collaboration because you don't know the answer. You don't have certainty. Hey, let's get a group of us together and see if we can walk through this and meet this out and see where the ends of this thing might be. And hopefully, this is a big one, hopefully check your ego at the door, right? You've seen it 1,000 times, Mike, maybe 10,000 times. Check your ego at the door. It's not about you. This is about the mission. It's about solving the problem. I'll give you the last word on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And when I talk about things, like you mentioned ego, and I talked about other characteristics, attributes of good leaders like empathy and agility and keeping on top of the situation and continuous learning. Some of these things I'm naturally good at. Others I'm not. So I have much of an ego as anybody else does. And someone tells me, like, I get my feelings hurt, right? So it's always a struggle with me. I get caught in an ego trap. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. This is not about me. Even obviously you don't have a big ego because you're helping develop other people, but you look at it, so that feeds ego as well. So you have to, it's not easy to be a leader. As you said, it's a journey, a process, and you have to keep working on this. I'd like to think I'm a good leader, a competent leader. Am I a great leader? I doubt it. I'm trying to get there. I'm a great leader in that I know I can improve and I have a lot of flaws, but I'm working on it. And I think I've done good things. So I think if you have like, I'm a general and whatever, it's like, okay, that stands on its own. But like a normal person who you're dealing with different people's situations every day, you're not at the level of international combat or whatever. You're not a world leader on a stage. It's a lot more subtle, and we have to have humility about it. I talked earlier about the great man theory or trait theory. Everybody has attributes, and I list a lot of these things when I think of the core attributes in my book. And you don't even have to have all of them. Maybe you don't have to have most of them. You have to have key ones. And certainly integrity and ethics is a non-negotiable. But you can make, like, if you have just a couple of them, if you're humorous, as long as you deploy it at the right time, maybe it's self-effacing, it takes the air out of a tense situation, and you're not belittling anyone or you're not making light of a serious situation. Using what you have, and I talk about that in the book as well, knowing your own personality, taking sort of a personality attributes test and leveraging what you're good at for leadership. Some things you're not as good at, you have other ways of doing that. So if I'm much more of an analytical person, less of a people person, my two best people skills, say, are optimism and whatever the other one might be. I lean into that, right? Like, I'm not good at sales. Other people are. They can use the sales aspect of the personality, be a good leader, but you don't need to have that as long as you know what you are strong with. So I probably diverted from what I was started to say, but there's so many ideas packed into what you're saying, and one thought leads to another. I hardly contain myself to unpack these ideas. And so there you have it. Some of my thoughts in leadership.
I appreciate it. I'll tell you a quick story. One time I bumped into a website that said the 57 traits of a leader. And I went, and you look around and go, well, what happens if I only have 46? Am I done for fun? Is it over for me? And I think that this is the central theme. The leader gives us leadership. They are the bestower of leadership. And my answer is not when you see leadership as a process that anybody can engage in. So I'll just ask you one last question, Mike, because we are at the end, and that is, what is your hope for the future? Where do you see Mike Gips going in the future? What's in store for you?
It's hard to say. I like where I am at Kroll. We're doing really good things. I have I've been in the field for so long. I was with ASIS, which is the largest membership group for security professionals. So I know a lot of people. I've worked with them very closely over the years. This book, sort of my tribute to them, with a lot of their stories, their experiences. They're not perfect either. I think my next book, though, will go even further. And when you ask about me, what do I want out of this? This was a book about security and leadership that's very much for security, risk, leaders. My next book, I think, will talk about, on a more societal basis, what some of these leadership challenges and critical events and security and crime history, how that changed us people, how we behave as a nation. So now I'm getting a little bit more sociological rather than, I think my next move is to have a broader canvas and talk about how little known and not the obvious 9/11s or the Columbines, but how some of these little events, but lesser known events, have moved the needle on how we behave as a society vis-a-vis security, crime and crime prevention, privacy, and things like that.
Yeah, I think it'll be a great book. I think we need to learn those lessons so we don't have to learn them again, the hard way. So we'll see. And I wish you the greatest success in that, Mike. This has been a wonderful conversation, Mike. I really appreciate your time this morning. I wish you, your family, all the greatest success in the future. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you. This was wonderful.
This is Dr. John Dentico. Remember, meaning is the new money, but it requires building the structures that deliver it. If today's conversation challenged your thinking or gave you a framework worth implementing, share it with a leader who needs to hear it. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit throttleupleadership.com for more resources. Until next time, keep throttling up and keep the people at the center of everything you do.